The Blood of the Vampire by Florence Marryat, author of Love's Conflict, A Passing Madness, etc. Copyright edition, Leipzig, Bernhard Tauchnitz, 1897. Chapter 1. It was the magic hour of dining. The long dégout of Hist was almost deserted. So was the strip of loose yellow sand which skirted its base, and all the table d'hôtes were filling fast. Henri, the youngest waiter of the Hotel Lion d'Or, was standing on the steps between the two great gilded lions, which stood rampant on either side of the portals, vigorously ringing a loud and discordant bell to summons the stragglers, whilst the ladies, who were waiting the commencement of dinner in this little salon to the side, stopped their ears to dull its clamour. Philippe and Jules were busy, laying white cloths and glasses, etc., on the marble tables in the open balcony outside the salle à manger, where strangers to the hotel might dine à la carte, if they chose. Inside, the long, narrow tables were decorated with dusty geraniums and fuchsias, whilst each cruet stand had a small bunch of dirty artificial flowers tied to its handle. But the visitors of Lion d'Or, who were mostly English, were too eager for their evening meal to cavil at their surroundings. The Baroness Gobelli, with her husband on one side and her son on the other, was the first to seat herself at table. The Baroness always appeared with soup, for she had observed that the first comers received a more generous helping than those who came in last. No such anxiety occupied the minds of Mrs. Pullen and her friend Miss Layton, who sat opposite to the Baroness and her family. They did not care sufficiently for the potage aux croutons, which usually formed the beginning of the table d'hôte dinner. The long tables were soon filled with a motley crew of English, Germans, and Belgians, all chattering, especially the foreigners, as fast as their tongues could travel. Among them was a sprinkling of children, mostly unruly and ill-behaved, who had to be called to order every now and then, which made Miss Layton's lip curl with disgust. Just opposite to her, and next to Mr. Bobby Bates, the Baroness' son by her first marriage, and whom she always treated as if he had been a boy of 10 years old, was an unoccupied chair turned up against the table to signify that it was engaged. "I wonder if that is for the German princess of whom Madame Lamont is so fond of talking," whispered Eleanor Layton to Mrs. Pullen. "She said this morning that she is expected this afternoon." "Oh, surely not," replied her friend. "I do not know much about royalties, but I should think that a princess would hardly dine at a public table d'hôte." "Oh, a German princess, what is that?" said Miss Layton, with a lip curled again, for she was a daughter of Lord Walthamstow, and thought very little of any aristocracy except that of her own country. As she spoke, however, the chair opposite was sharply pulled into place, and a young lady seated herself on it, and looked boldly, though not brazenly, up and down the tables, and at her neighbours on each side of her. She was a remarkable-looking girl, more remarkable, perhaps, than beautiful, for her beauty did not strike one at first sight. Her figure was tall, but slight, and lithesome. It looked almost boneless as she swayed easily from side to side of her chair. Her skin was colourless but clear. Her eyes were long-shaped, dark and narrow, with heavy lids and thick black lashes which laid upon her cheeks. Her brows were arched and delicately pencilled, and her nose was straight and small. Not so her mouth, however, which was large, with lips of a deep blood colour, displaying small white teeth. To crown all, her head was covered with a mass of soft, dull, blue-black hair, which was twisted in careless masses about the nape of her neck, and looked as if it was unaccustomed to comb or hairpin. She was dressed very simply in a white cambric frock, but there was not a woman present who had not discovered in 5 minutes that the lace with which it was profusely trimmed was costly Valenciennes, and that it was clasped at her throat with brilliants. The newcomer did not seem in the least abashed by the number of eyes which were turned upon her, but bore the scrutiny very calmly, smiling in a sort of furtive way at everybody until the entrees were handed round, when she riveted all her attention upon the contents of her plate. Miss Layton thought that she had never seen any young person devour her food with so much avidity and enjoyment. She could not help watching her. The Baroness Gobli, who was a very coarse feeder, scattered her food over her plate, and not infrequently over the tablecloth as well, was nothing compared to the young stranger. It was not so much that she ate rapidly and with evident appetite, but that she kept her eyes fixed upon her food, as if she feared someone might deprive her of it. As soon as her plate was empty, she called sharply to the waiter in French, and ordered him to get her some more. "That's right, my dear," exclaimed the Baroness, nodding her huge head and smiling broadly at the newcomer. "Make 'em bring you more. It's an excellent dish, that. I'll have some more myself." As Philippe deposited the last helping of the entree on the young lady's plate, the Baroness thrust hers beneath his nose. "Here," she said, bring 3 more helpings for the Baroness and Bobby and me." The man shook his head to intimate that the dish was finished, but the Baroness was not to be put off with a flimsy excuse. She commenced to make a row. Few meals passed without a squabble of some sort between the hotel servants and this terrible woman. "Now we are all in for it again," murmured Miss Layton into Miss Pullen's ear. The waiter brought a different entree, but the Baroness insisted upon having a second helping of the tête de veau aux champignons. Il n'y a plus, madame," asseverated Philippe, with a gesture of depredation. "What does he say?" demanded the Baroness, who was not good at French. "There is no more, maintier," replied her husband, with a strong German accent. "Confound their impudence!" exclaimed his wife, with a heated countenance. "Here, send monsieur here at once. I'll soon see if we're not to have enough to eat in this beastly hotel." All the ladies who understood what she said looked horrified at such language, but that was of no consequence to Madame Gobli, who continued to call out at intervals for Monsieur until she found that the dinner was coming to an end without her, and thought it would be more politic to attend to business and postpone her feud till a more convenient occasion. The Baroness Gobli was a mystery to most people in the hotel. She was an enormous woman of the elephant build, with a large, flat face and clumsy hands and feet. Her skin was coarse, so was her hair, so were her features. The only things which redeemed an otherwise repulsive face were a pair of good-humoured, though cunningly blue eyes, and a set of firm, white teeth. Who the Baroness had originally been, no one could quite make out. It was evident that she must have sprung from some low origins from her lack of education and breeding. Yet she spoke familiarly of aristocratic names, even of royal ones, and appeared to be acquainted with their families and homes. There was a floating rumor that she had been old Mr. Bates' cook before he married her, and when he left her a widow with an only child and a considerable fortune, the little German baron had thought that her money was fair equivalent for her personality. She was exceedingly vulgar, and, when roused, exceedingly vituperative, but she possessed a rough good humour when pleased, and a large amount of natural shrewdness, which stood her instead of cleverness. But she was an unscrupulous liar, and rather boasted of the fact than otherwise. Having plenty of money at her command, she used to take violent fancies to people, taking them up suddenly, loading them with presents and favors for as long as it pleased her, and then dropping them as suddenly, without why or wherefore, even insulting them if she could not shake them off without doing so. The Baron was completely under her thumb. More than that, he was servile in her presence, which astonished those people who did not know that amongst her other arrogant insistences, the Baroness laid claim to holding intercourse with certain supernatural and invisible beings who had the power to wreak vengeance on all those who offended her. This fear it was, combined with the fact that she had all the money and kept the strings of the bag pretty close where he was concerned, that made the Baron wait upon his wife's wishes as if he were her slave. perhaps the softest spot in the Baroness's heart, was kept for her sickly and uninteresting son, Bobby Bates, whom she treated, nevertheless, with the roughness of a tigress for her cub. She kept him still more under her surveillance than she did her husband, and Bobby, though he had attained his 19th year, dared not to say boo to a goose in presence of his mamma. As the cheese was handed round, Eleanor Layton rose from her seat with an impatient gesture. "Do let us get out of this atmosphere, Margaret," she said in a low tone. "I can really not stand it any longer." The two ladies left the table and went out beyond the balcony to where a number of painted iron chairs and tables were placed on the Degu, for the accommodations of passing wayfarers who might wish to rest a while and quench their thirst with lemonade or lager beer. "I wonder who that girl is," remarked Mrs. Pullen as soon as they were out of hearing. "I don't know whether I like her or not, but there is something rather distinguished-looking about her." "Do you think so?" said Miss Layton. "I thought she only distinguished herself by eating like a cormorant. I never saw anyone in society gobble her food in such a manner. She made me positively sick." "Was it as bad as that?" replied the more quiet Miss Pullen, in an indifferent manner. Her eyes were attracted just then by the perambulator which contained her baby, and she rose to meet it. "How is she, nurse?" she asked anxiously, as if she had not parted from the infant an hour before. "Has she been awake all the time?" "Yes, ma'am, and looking about her like anything, but she seems to have inclined to sleep now. I thought it was about time to take her in." "Oh, no, not on such a warm, lovely evening. If she does go to sleep in the open air, it will do her no harm. Leave her with me. I want you to go indoors and find out the name of the young lady who sat opposite to me at dinner today. Philippe understands English. He will tell you." "Why on earth do you want to know?" demanded Miss Layton, as the servant disappeared. "Oh, I don't know. I feel a little curious, that is all. She seems so young to be by herself." Eleanor Layton understood, answering nothing, but walked across the Degu and stood looking out over the sea. She was anticipating the arrival of her fiancé, Captain Ralph Pullen of the Limerick Rangers, but he had delayed his coming to join them, and she began to find haste rather dull. The visitors of the Lion d'Or had finished their meal by this time, and were beginning to reassemble on the Doog, preparing to take a stroll before they turned into one of the many cafés chantants which were situated at stated intervals in front of the sea. Among them came the Baroness Gobli, leaning heavily on a thick stick with one hand and her husband's shoulder with the other. The couple presented an extraordinary appearance as they perambulated slowly up and down the Degu.